Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erica. I'm the author of the blog The Simple Home Place, and today I want to share with you a tutorial all about how to make a flannel blanket with a crocheted border. So I wanted to share a little bit of backstory on how I came up with the design for these blankets. So last year, one of my friends, her name is Abby, she has a magazine, it's called Our Living Journal, and she reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to create a blanket that she had this picture of from Pinterest, if I'd be willing to create that to be featured in her magazine. And of course, I was super excited to try to figure out how to recreate this design and maybe put my own spin on it. And I'll leave a picture if I can, so you can see that. And it's a design that I've seen, it must be viral on Pinterest because I had it pinned for years. And it was a flannel blanket that had a really pretty palm border. And that was what she asked me to make. And then she said, you know, if you want to try some other things, go ahead. And so I decided to try to figure out how to put a crocheted border on a flannel blanket. And I dug around and got some different inspiration and different ideas. I made her some. They were featured in her journal, which I'll leave a link down below. If you're interested in more simple living, farm life, homeschooling, creating things from scratch, you'll probably like that. So I'll leave a link down below if you want to check that out. But since then, I have made probably a dozen of these blankets to sell, to give to others, and I really enjoy making them. So I wanted to share the process from start to finish of how you can make these. They are perfect for the fall. They're really nice lap blankets. They are not super heavy, but just enough thickness for the fall coming up. Her original idea was a campfire blanket, so take it out to the campfire and you know, you can be nice and cozy. And in my opinion, I think these are super beautiful. They're super versatile. You can make them in so many different ways, using obviously different types of flannel and colors and creating different borders. It doesn't have to be a crocheted border. You could do the palm border, leave it plain. There's really endless possibilities, and I'll go over some of those variations that you can do in this video later on. But yeah, I just wanted to share the process because I really enjoy making these and I think they are super beautiful. So let's get into the video. One really quick thing, and I will explain later, but I will actually be giving away a blanket in this video. So if you want to learn more about that, make sure you stick to the end and I will share all of the details of this giveaway. But without further ado, let's get into learning how to make one of these flannel blankets.
To start this blanket, we are using 2 yards of a flannel cotton fabric. I get mine at Joann's. I will leave the links down below to the specific products used in this video, as well as a couple of blog posts, so you can go check those out if you're interested. This is from their Platitudes line or their brushed flannel cotton. You just want to make sure that the pattern is on both sides since we're only using one piece of fabric. And I like to wash and dry mine on hot so that it is pre-shrunk and you don't have to worry about shrinkage after you have finished your blanket. Then what I like to do is fold up my blanket and trim off the excess so that we have a nice rectangular shape and that the corners will align when we go to fold our blanket. So this is just a little extra step that I like to do to make sure that everything is nice and square. Now we are going to hem our blanket. Now you could do this with a blanket that you have that already is hemmed and everything, but if you want to make this from scratch, then you'll have to hem it. And what I do is I fold the edge to 1/2 inch and I'm measuring the fabric only, not that fringe. So you want to measure 1/2 inch on that fabric. And then I take my iron. Make sure that you're using an iron that has steam because you can really get a good press. And the key to this is not sliding your iron back and forth. You kind of want to just press it. You see I'm sliding it a little bit, but what I mean by that is you don't want to wiggle it too much so that it's moving the fabric around. You want a nice straight edge. And so I find it easiest if you kind of just press on it as you go. And this helps to get a really nice clean line. Once you have gone all the way down your one side of fabric, pressing it at 1/2 inch, then we are going to go ahead and fold it over again to 3/4 inch and go ahead and press. And at this point, that's when I add pins to make sure that we keep that fabric nice and folded so that when we go to sew, we don't have to worry about it. So you are going to repeat this process on all 4 sides of your blanket, and then we will move on to actually sewing and hemming. Now, one quick note, you do not have to sew this if you don't want to. You can definitely use fabric glue. Make sure that you're finding one that you can wash and all of that stuff. So if you're not into sewing, don't have a sewing machine, feel free to use fabric glue and that should suffice. But I prefer to sew mine, just peace of mind and because I know how to. So quickly before we go and sew and hem, what I like to do is take the bulk out of the corners of the fabric, because if you do not do this and you go to sew it, it's really hard for the sewing machine to go over those corners because there's so much fabric. So what you need to do is we're going to unfold both sides and then refold the side on the right, and I'm just checking to make sure it's still at 3/4 inch, and then I make a mark kind of low on that side. So you can see that mark there. And then what I'm going to do is unfold that, and then we're going to refold the bottom up. And again, just checking to make sure it's at 3/4 inch. And then I will make a mark at the very top of where that fold is. And then what we'll do is we will create basically a rectangle that we're going to cut out. And this is completely hidden. You don't see this at any point in time. But like I said, it will take the bulk out. So to create the rectangle, I am going to measure from the top of that mark that's on the very top. We're going to measure halfway down. So in this instance, it's 1 inch. And then we're going to add 1/4 inch. So 2 little ticks on your measuring tape. And then from that middle mark, we are going to align that to the top of our tape measure, and then the end of the tape measure is aligned with that mark on the left side. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully you're seeing what I'm doing there. So that is our rectangle that we're going to cut out. Now I find that I need to cut it a little bit in, so not directly on that line, but just a little bit in, and that just helps hide it a little bit better when you're going to fold it back up and going to sew it. Now, a little trick that I've done is to use a little bit of fabric glue in those corners to just make sure it stays as I'm going back through, because if you don't get a really good press on your fabric, they can tend to come undone a little bit. So this just ensures that we have a nice square end, and you can see the difference between the two. So now I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew at the 1/2 inch mark or 3/8 inch. And basically what that means, if you're new to sewing, is that you're going to line up that very edge of your fabric with the tick marks that are on your sewing machine, and it'll say 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch. Basically, you don't want it completely all the way on the edge on that left side of the fold, but you do want to make sure that most of it is being captured, and so you get a nice flat hem, basically. So, again, this is maybe not the most beginner-friendly project, and I wouldn't say it goes along with my super simple theme that I like to share. However, if you are used to sewing, then this project will be fairly straightforward for you. And like I said, you don't need to know how to sew. You can use fabric glue, or you can just use a flannel blanket that you get from the store that's already hemmed, and then you can add a border to it. So it's totally up to you. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to hem all 4 sides. And if you haven't noticed now, what I like to do is I hem with the folded side facing up. So the finished side is actually on the bottom. And the reason I do this is that I can actually really see where I'm sewing. Because if I were to do it on the other side or the prettier side, then I would have a hard time seeing where that edge is, and this just takes a little bit of that guesswork out. One other note is I always front and back stitch at the beginning and end, and that just helps to secure it as well. Then a finishing touch as far as the sewing goes, I like to just take my little scissors and cut away any of the loose strands. Just cleans it up a little bit, and then we are ready to move on to the crocheted border. Now earlier I mentioned that you have a lot of different options of what you want to do. You can leave that blanket plain and just have a plain flannel blanket, which is super awesome. You could add a pom border, and I've done that. I've sewn it on and I've glued it, and I prefer the glue method. Or we can do a crocheted border, which is what I'm showing you now. So what I did is I went around on all 4 sides and marked every 1/2 inch along that hem, and I tried to line the dot up in the very middle of the hem every 1/2 inch. And then I use what's called an awl, and that is just like a tapered puncturing tool that you can use to puncture holes in the fabric. So once all of that is done on all 4 sides, I am going to be using some cotton thread, and you can get this at Joann's. Again, I'll have links down below. And what you do is we're going to take this side by side. So for this first side, what you do is you take the end of your yarn and align it with the end of your fabric, or that side, and take it all the way down to the other end, and then you put your finger there, and then we're going to fold it twice. And so basically you want the thread to be 3 times the length of your side. So that's how I measure that out. We are going to tie a knot at the very end, and then I'm using a yarn needle, and I'm just threading that cotton thread on there. And now it's time to create the blanket stitch. So to create the blanket stitch, what I like to do is take my yarn needle, flip the blanket over to where the 2 sides of the hem come together in the corner, and we are going to push that needle through, up through underneath, and come out the very corner. Again, when I'm explaining it, I feel like it's hard to explain, so hopefully this visual representation is helping you. And what we'll do is feed that string through the very first hole, and I find it easier, especially because it's very long at the beginning, is I will pull it out the left side, and then we'll take our yarn needle and place it through that stitch, we'll call it, that we just created, and put it diagonally up through the left corner and pull it again. Again, hopefully you're able to see that. So we're going to feed the thread through and pull it all the way through that hole. Then we're taking our yarn needle up diagonally to the left and pulling that through, and that creates a blanket stitch. So now we've come to the end of our first side, and it's a little bit difficult to get it in that very last hole just because you've got the glue and the fabric, and that will complete our very first side. And now we're going to do that for all 4 sides. Like I said, I take each side individually, and then when you've come to the very last side, actually we do this for every corner, you're going to take your yarn needle and push it back down through where the 2 hems come together in the corner, and basically you'll have 2 pieces of your thread hanging down on the back side of your blanket. Then I like to tie a double knot, and make sure you're tying it fairly tight without tightening your blanket stitches on the side, so you might have to pull those out a little bit. But we're going to double knot, and that just secures everything, making sure that it's not going to come unraveled if you have to wash it or anything like that. Then what I'll do is snip it fairly short, and then I will take some fabric glue and just push those little itty bits in underneath that hem, and that just hides everything and gives you a really clean look, in my opinion. So I'm just taking that yarn needle to help direct those ends of the thread in there, and yeah, it'll give it a nice clean look. Now we're on to the crocheted border, and for this particular blanket I'm using a 4mm crochet hook, and this is that thread that I was using. Like I said, it'll be linked down below, and we are just going to start crocheting. So to start off, you go in the corner, you're going to push your crochet hook through one of those blanket stitches and then wrap the thread around and pull it through, and now you can begin. Now I do have a separate video that goes over how to do this a little bit more in depth, so you can check that out. I'll leave that link down below as well. But what I like to do is take this blanket by blanket. So it depends on the color of the blanket, the feel that I'm going for. Perhaps if I'm making this for someone, kind of what they want, or what kind of style they like. And so for this blanket, I wanted something a little bit more dainty. I've also in the past played around with the weight of the yarn. So if you want something that's maybe, I don't think masculine is the right word, but something a little bit heavier, you could use a thicker weighted yarn. You don't have to use this crochet thread, although I do recommend it for the blanket stitch itself, but you definitely don't have to. You can play around with all kinds of different things. But since I was going for that daintier type of look, I chose to stay with the thread, and we're just going very simple. So the 2 half double crochets in each of the blanket stitches, and then in the corners I do 3 half double crochets, and that just to make sure that it's not too tight in the corners and it doesn't kind of fold over on itself. You could even do 4 if you wanted to. Then once we come to the end of that first row, we are going to finish off with a slip stitch, chain 1, and now it's on to the final row in this particular blanket. So what I chose to do is just do single crochets in every one of the stitches, and we're going to just do that again all the way around our blanket, and that will be the final row. Lastly, we are just going to snip off that crochet thread, and you will be left with basically 2 ends, your start and finishing thread, and we are just going to weave them in. So I'm using a crochet needle, and we are going to weave in a decent amount of this, and that basically will ensure that if you go to wash this or just over time, that the end of your crochet project is not going to unravel and start to come out. And so very carefully, I just like to go up on the back side, up through some of the back loops of the stitches, and I go in probably a couple of inches. I do that for both of the strings that are left over. And again, it just makes it so it has a less likely chance of unraveling in the future. And here is the final result. I'm super happy with how simple and clean and beautiful this border came out.
Now on to the giveaway. I will be giving away a flannel blanket. So you or whoever wins will have the choice between the blanket that was featured in the video or this buffalo check blanket sitting behind me. And as I'm showing some up close footage of those blankets so that you can get an idea of what you might choose if you win, let me go over some of the details of the giveaway. So the giveaway will be going from September 20th, 2023, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time to September 27th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will choose the winner of the giveaway on September 28th. And then here are a couple more details about the giveaway. So first of all, this giveaway is in no way associated with YouTube. I am solely responsible for all aspects of that, including choosing the winner and then sending out the blanket of their choosing. Now, you do need to be 18 years old in order to enter and be located within the US. You also need to be subscribed to my channel and then leave a comment down below letting me know what your favorite fall activity is. So those are the stipulations. I will have everything listed down below, so make sure that you check all of the rules out there before you do enter. But there you have it. That is the giveaway. So if you made it this far, I really do hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you learned something new. I feel like this is just a really fun project to make for the fall. They're great to give as gifts. So if you want to get a head start on your Christmas present making, if you're into that. These are something great that I think a lot of people will love. Like I said, they're great for, sitting around the campfire, sitting around the house. They're great lap blankets. They're not too thick, but they're not too thin either. So yeah, again, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being with me here today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.